Welcome back. In this episode, I'm following up with the work that we did with Pyrotech Aerospace in Abbotsford regarding the heat treatment of the fuselage frames for Hawker Typhoon JP843. So as you can see, I've got a stack of fuselage frame segments here, and I've already put a bunch here, more or less just for safekeeping. So you can see right now that there's just side plates on the station plates here, no tops, because again, they do need to be trimmed. You'll also notice that I've got a couple wooden templates that I've built into there. And this was just part of my testing my new system for splicing these. I've gone with a slightly different way of doing it than I did when I trimmed down the Jet Age museum frames. And it's not because it wasn't accurate, it's just because the process that I used was a little bit cumbersome, and I'd like to streamline it a bit and absolutely eliminate any possibility of messing these frames up now that there's so much work into them. So that's where these templates come in. I'll explain more as we go along, but for now, I'll show you the process on one frame, which is going to be this frame here. This is frame H towards the tail of the Typhoon. As you can see, I've already done a couple here. This is frame J and JK, but I'll run you guys through exactly what I'm doing to trim the frame segments and fit them to the station plate on frame H. And the first step to do that, it can be done in place here, but it's quite a simple procedure to remove the station plates from the spine of the fixture. And because we're not actually set up and dialed in right now, it's just a really nice way to do it. And then I can work on the bench, and you guys will probably get a better idea of what's going on as well. So the first step here will be to remove the station plate and mounting for frame H and bring it over to the bench. So I think I showed some of this in earlier episodes about how the fixture adjusts and all that good stuff. But essentially, this station plate is held on by this 1/2 inch bolt that's on a spherical washer and has a number of adjustment cap screws here and on the forward face for adjustment that way. What I'm going to do before I take this one bolt out of here is I'm going to remove the bottom section of the oval, which is closing in these two pieces of angle right there. And then we'll be able to lift the whole thing off once that is removed. So now that that bottom segment is removed, all we need to do is pull this 1/2 inch bolt, and we're free to bring it over to the bench. Next step is to reattach this bottom frame segment station plate. As you can see, there is writing on the front of it, and they're all marked for every segment: port, starboard, top, and bottom, and that all faces to the front. So right now we've got this station plate laying face down, which is ideal because our fuselage frame segment actually attached to the back of them. So for now, this is going back on. We'll put that forwards. Not a huge deal because everything is symmetrical, but we'll get this bolted back together. So now that we've got that all back together, I'm just going to fit the pieces, make sure everything lines up really well, and then we'll start marking out. And what we're going to do is this extra inch that was used for hardness testing and for labeling so that we always maintain traceability of the part is going to now be cut off approximately midway through that stringer. This is the template, pretty quick and dirty. I just took this 1/8 inch, I think they call it hardboard, really just pressed wood, and I grabbed a bunch of sheets of it from the local hardware store and cut it out. It took no time at all on the laser. These components, I went into the program and I just took that extra inch of material off that was normally still in the file for the form blocks, and that gives a really good representation of what's going to need to be trimmed off here on these guys. So that's where we'll get going. I'll fit these last two pieces, and then we'll start prepping to trim down the components and get everything nested in as a complete frame. So this is a good example of a small change that came into play post heat treatment. And that's to do with the lineup of the tooling holes. So basically what's happened is that frame segment has closed in a little bit this way, and it's pretty reasonable for what all this has been through. And the best way that I found to fix that is to just give a little bit of shrink on this outside here, and that pulls the material back together this way. So that was just a really quick adjustment. You might have noticed that I had to use more pressure than I was last time. That's just because we're now in T42 condition instead of O material. So it's quite a bit stronger, but that adjustment is perfect, with the exception of it did have that little bit of a negative effect. So what it needs to counter that is a bit of stretch in here, and that'll push those outer edges down again. So I've just put a bit of masking tape here to cover up the end so it doesn't scratch our part. I'm going to give it a bit of pressure. I'll go fit that back up and see how it is. So that was all pretty straightforward. It just needs a little bit more stretch in here. Make sure we haven't adjusted our tooling hole positions. Everything's good there. And there might still be a little tiny bit here, but that's excellent. I'm really happy with that. I did get a couple little marks on there, but I'll give them a scuff. There's no issue with that either. So now we're sitting properly with that part. We've got our upper component on as well, and we can get to marking out where we need to trim these frames. Now I'm going to use my little template. As I said, these are 1/8 hardboard or something like that we cut out. Very, very inexpensive, and it's basically a one-time use template. I'm not going to save these. But as I say, they are 1 inch shorter than the form blocks, so they'll give us the true center line of that stringer location and indicate exactly where we need to cut. Now to do that and to do it accurately, they do share the same tooling holes, so the first step will be to grab a couple bolts and put that in place. So now that we know it's located properly, I've got to check the fit over here. And this is pretty common with these guys. You can see that that form block sits right in the radius, which is because it's the same shape basically as what that form block was, but has no radius on it. So I'm going to take these off, but first I'll mark either end quite crudely, just so they can cut a clearance on them. Same with this one, right there. And I'll remove that and just cut a small relief on that edge. As long as I've got this nice straight edge here, everything's going to be good. So quick and simple, I'm just going to take a little bit off this edge up to that mark, and that'll provide clearance for the radius inside that piece. Same thing on the other side. Now it nests in there quite nicely. Might be a little bit extra clearance, but it gives me no stress on that little template that we have whatsoever, and a really easy way to come in here and just mark that. Now that we've got that marked, I'm going to do that both for the bottom piece and the top piece, as well as the port and starboard sides. Once those are all marked, we can get to trimming the ends off of here. So with the sander, I used the same support block that I used to keep it off the table by more than the flange, and also to support the area being ground, just like I did to support it being cut. And then I just touch it really, really carefully, and want to make sure that the disc is parallel to the line that I've drawn, and I take it right down. Very, very gently until that's done. So again, using the exact same template, I place that on here, I line up the tooling holes, I'll put bolts in those, and it'll give me the same edge over at this end, as well as the other end. So I'll go ahead and get those marked, and follow the same process again to trim them and sand them down, both port as seen here, and starboard on the other side. I'm going to rework those so they line up perfectly. And it happens over here again. This one's probably a little bit more significant. So under a 1/16 of an inch, I'd say, but pretty darn close to it, and that's not acceptable to me. So I'll have to make sure that everything lines up really well there. And I'll also check the outside edge by running a spline across here to make sure that it sits on either of these corners and takes that shape true. But for now, I'm going to just verify these. Anything that's overlapping will get sanded down. This gap is actually quite nice. And this one, again, is a little bit tight down here. And I can see, again, it's off, which is interesting because this is the first frame I've seen this on. So we'll get into that shortly. So an interesting thing here, I can see that I need to realign these frame segments. They're sitting in their tooling holes, but it's quite uneven here. So to fix that, I want to first see if I need to adjust the back side, or if I need to look at, say, shrinking in here a little bit more to bring that slightly more open. So the best way to do that is to ensure that the outside is true, and it's really simple, just using a ruler as a spline and laying it across those points. If there's anything that was out the way that the sheet would lie on this transition, you'd see a gap, usually on one side or the other, just in this area here. So it looks pretty good there. So to me, and judging from a couple other things, it looks like maybe this it goes kind of out of its profile right at the end there. But I'm just going to massage this back and bring that up into play again with its mating partner here, the port side segment. So I've just gone ahead and done the same thing, but this time with a 12-inch ruler so I can span more stringer locations. And everything looks really good. I do see maybe just a little bit there. You got to be careful though, because you can usually push that out by just moving the ruler, tightening it up a little bit. But it does look like there's a little bit of a low in here. Maybe a few thousandths of an inch, or it might, oh, I see. What it is there's just a little bend on the corner here, and it's sticking out, so it's pushing the top in. So everything is good there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work this. And to do that, I'm going to use, this is the bead rolling die that I have that's produced for rolling inside these channels. So it fits in there nicely, and it has the correct radius to bend over. So we're not going to crush one of our radii. And I'll just use a piece of, I've got this scrap piece of 6061 aluminum. I'll use that as a backing block, and I'll clamp it over and put this in a vise and slowly, gently massage that over. So back at the bead roller, and I just want to true this up. So I'm going to run it in. I've reversed the bead roller. And I'm just going to go to about, oops, nope. I'm going to go to the center of the wheel there, because I want to make sure I haven't caused any issue with a bulge there. That looks pretty good. So now back at the station plate. Things are lining up that way. We've got no issue here, with the exception of maybe a little extra material right now. So I'm just going to go ahead with the die grinder here really quickly and just true that up because it's bugging me. So now I've got these all trued up, and everything is looking pretty good. There was quite a bit of movement required on this one. I was quite surprised actually, because the other ones went a lot easier, but a little back and forth with the hammer and the forms and the bead roller there, and everything came out quite well. So I've still got a little bit of finagling to do, but my next step is to focus on these, and it'll be the initial part of my cleanup and deburring, and that's just to use my little template that I've used for a lot of other things in the past to lay out and mark just a corrective path for that overlap area so it transitions nice and smoothly. So I'm going to go ahead and do that at all 4 corners, and then I can take these off of the station plate and clean those up. So you can see at those locations I've got some very light marks. The other side is probably the heaviest. This one's got to be trimmed down quite substantially to line up properly. And then I've also got a couple other marks, like you can see right here. I've just got a very fine line where I've got to sand that down. But you'll notice, I think I might have mentioned it in other episodes, basically as I go through the processes here, where there's items that need to be done to hit the next objective in the forming process, that's what I do. And a lot of times I leave little bits like this for multiple reasons. It takes time to trim it and file it and do all that good stuff and get it true, but also because there might still be a little bit of forming, like the little shrink that I've put here in some of them. And if I have to do that, it could very well change the shape of that opening. So I'd rather have a little bit more now. And now that the part has passed through all of the forming and heat treatment process, it's time to get rid of that and trim it so that it fits the stringer as it passes through the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll mark all these out. These ones are pretty big tabs that are left. I've left them quite a bit smaller in other cases. But I'll mark those out, trim them down, and I'll also get to filing and finishing the profile of that, as well as multiple radii and cleaning up edges. So I'm going to go ahead and start just trying to meet some of the marks that I've made here and get them lining up nicely. As well as you can see, there's still a little bump there. So I'll flatten all of these off in every stringer location and put a radius on each of the tabs. So the next step with these parts, now that they're all sanded down and properly radiused, is to clean up the burrs and any marks from that abrasive disc. And to do that, I'm going to use this guy. This is a rubberized deburring wheel, and I believe a lot of times they're called convolute wheels, and they're super fine grit in them, but they do a really great job of polishing and cleaning up edges. So it'll get most of this stuff, most of the areas that I've had to touch or rework are all going to get a little bit of this, and then I've got a little secret tool that I'll finish up inside of these edges with, where this would be potential to cause some damage to the parts. So now my secret weapon is this. It's the same thing as a convolute or a rubberized deburring wheel, but it's a little 2-inch guy, and I use it on my die grinder. And what it does is it's going to let me get these edges in here. Oh, probably doesn't work. It'll let me get all these edges in here where there's still a light burr, and you can't really safely get it up to that 6-inch wheel. So these are very mild. You're not going to do a lot of damage with them, but you'll do a really great job at knocking that burr off. So there we go. That's you see how much that cleaned those parts up. We've got nice radii in there. We don't have any burrs or any irregular shapes or anything like that. They're nice and smooth, and they're really ready to move on to the next step. So I'm going to put these to the side, and we'll have to fit the station plate for frame K back to our fixture, and we'll get those put on there and move on to the next one. So there we go. That's the process for doing our final trim and kind of truing, as well as a nice deburring and ready for the next step of the process. So that's exactly what needs doing to all of these frames, guys, is just a nice tidy up, cleaning it up, getting rid of any kind of scoring or stress risers on the edge of material, knocking off the burrs, putting on our radii, and really prepping them to get ready to install splice plates on them. So logical next step is to start to produce and fit those, and hopefully we'll have an episode showing exactly what I've got to do that, and we'll get these frames one step closer to paint. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next episode. Take care. Cheers.